Good morning and welcome to the second of two public comment hearings regarding proposed changes to the Public Housing Admissions and Continued Occupancy Policy, or ACOP, and the HCV Administrative Plan. My name is Jennifer Hoyle. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff, and I'll be moderating today's hearing. I'd like to begin by calling your attention to the slide on the screen, which provides information on translation services provided by CHA. This information is also available on CHA's website at www.thecha.org. The public comment period began on April 29th and runs through May 31st. The purpose of the public comment process and the public comment hearings is to provide an overview of proposed changes to the ACOP and administrative plan and to give residents and members of the public and other interested parties the opportunity to submit comments and questions before these documents are submitted to the Board of Commissioners for approval. Comments and questions regarding the changes to the ACOP and administrative plan can be submitted by email to commentontheplan@thecha.org, as well as regular mail and fax, and during the public comment hearings. To encourage participation in this process, we're making a variety of information available on CHA's website at www.thecha.org. This includes the resident notice, which has the information about where and how to submit comments, the full ACOP and administrative plan, and summaries of the proposed changes to both documents. There is a button on CHA's homepage that links to all of this information. At this time, I'm going to ask Jamie Muth, Program and Process Analyst for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and Ketsia Kolane, Deputy Chief for Policy and Occupancy for Public Housing, to provide an overview of the changes to the ACOP and administrative plan. Following these presentations, we will address any questions or comments regarding the ACOP and administrative plan that have been submitted in the chat. If you have a question or comment about a different topic, such as an issue regarding your unit or voucher, we will record the question and have CHA staff follow up with you at a later time. I will now turn the microphone over to Jamie to begin the overview.
Thanks, Jenny. Excuse me. CHA is proposing 6 changes to the 2022 administrative plan. 3 changes referring to the unit transfer process, 1 change incorporating a standalone medical marijuana policy, 1 change highlighting a change to the guest policy, and 1 providing housing choice voucher applicant preference for the project-based voucher waiting list. Additionally, CHA is making corresponding changes from the admissions and continued occupancy policy to the Chapter 18 Rental Assistance Demonstration chapter of the administrative plan. Those changes will be discussed later in the presentation. The next few slides will provide greater detail on the changes to the 2022 administrative plan. The first proposed change is the addition of Violence Against Women Act emergency transfer language, which clarifies that a participant who is a survivor of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking may request an emergency transfer in accordance with the Housing Choice Voucher Emergency Transfer Plan, as well as the rights afforded to them under the Violence Against Women Act. This process is currently in place. However, CHA wanted to ensure that survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking are aware of their rights under VAWA. The second proposed change clarifies that applicants and participants will be informed of the use of possession of medical marijuana, and that is considered a violation of the Controlled Substance Act, which may be grounds for denial from or admission in or termination from any CHA-supported housing program. Again, this policy is currently in place and consistent with HUD guidelines. The third proposed change aligns a policy from the ACOP Public Housing Guidelines to allow a guest to visit a family in an assisted unit for 14 consecutive calendar days as opposed to 7. The fourth proposed change added language to provide families on the HCV waiting list preference on the project-based voucher waiting list, with the goal to house those who have been on the HCV waiting list for a length of time. The last 2 changes are currently being done in practice and deal with the PBV transfer process. The proposed change outlines the circumstances CHA may grant a project based voucher transfer, which are any transfer related to the Violence Against Women Act emergency, a transfer related to a reasonable accommodation, a transfer for units under abatement, or a transfer for a participant that is currently overhoused or underhoused. PBV participants who are approved for a VAWA related transfer will receive priority for appropriate transfer unit. The second part of the transfer changes clarifies that a PBV participant approved for a PBV unit transfer will be referred to an appropriate unit and that CHA will provide 2 unit offers. CHA will evaluate whether a participant shall be removed from the transfer waiting list should they refuse a second unit offer without good cause. That wraps up those changes regarding the 2022 administrative plan, and I will turn it over to the public housing team to discuss those changes on the ACOP.
Good morning, and thank you, Jamie. My name is Ketsia Colonay, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Housing Policy and Occupancy with CHA's Property and Asset Management Division. I will provide an overview of the nearly dozen updates that are proposed for the 2022 Admissions and Continued Occupancy Policy, or ACOP. The ACOP specifically impacts CHA's public housing program. The updates are regarding transfer between programs, unit maintenance, zero income families, storage and moving costs, community space policy, the Just Housing Amendment, the cannabis policy, excess utility charges, medical marijuana, pets and assistance animals, and good cause reason. 3 of the proposed updates involve incorporating language from standalone policies into the ACOP, and 2 of the proposed updates involve eliminating language no longer applicable due to new processes. I will highlight these types of changes to the policy as we walk through this overview. Transfers between programs. The CHA may authorize mandatory administrative transfers or emergency transfers outside of a resident's current program. For an example, we would accommodate and allow for transfers between public housing and RAD. We will always attempt to first transfer that resident within their current program, such as between public housing and public housing. But in the event a unit is not identified, this provision of the policy will allow us to accommodate transfers between programs, again, for example, between public housing and the RAD project-based voucher program. Storage and moving costs. CHA will pay the costs associated with moving storage up to 90 days and transfers of utilities within certain transfer types. Unit maintenance. All residents, including those with live-in aides, are indeed responsible for housekeeping of their unit. If a resident is identified as being non-compliant, the CHA may proceed with any necessary action, including fines for the resident, until those conditions are cured. The community space policy. This is a standalone policy that we are looking to incorporate into the ACOP. Guidelines for the use of the CHA's community space will be detailed in the proposed update of the policy. Certain specific activities, such as the consumption of alcohol, will remain prohibited in CHA community space. Zero income families. To be consistent with CHA's admin plan, we are seeking to allow more time for a resident or family who needs to report zero income. Their circumstances will be examined every 180 calendar days instead of the current 90 calendar days. Good cause reasons. An applicant will no longer have the ability to decline a unit offer based on that applicant's relative location to place of employment, education, and so forth. These will no longer be considered good cause reasons as applicants now have the ability to choose site-specific locations. So applicants are able to identify site-based waitlist options that meet their specific criteria. So therefore, a good cause reason for declining a unit offer will no longer be that the applicant is refusing the offer because that unit is not in close proximity to their place of employment, education, and etc. The Just Housing Amendment. We are looking to incorporate language from the Just Housing Amendment regarding criminal background screening. That language will be consistent with and comply with the Cook County Just Housing Ordinance. The specific update to our process will include 2 phases for us to pre-qualify or to qualify a resident. Number 1, an applicant will have to undergo a pre-qualification process. Once that applicant is determined qualified based on a pre-qualification screening criteria, then we will conduct a criminal background check. Cannabis and medical marijuana. These are 2 additional examples of existing standalone policies that we are looking to incorporate into the ACOP. A specific provision that we want to bring your attention to is the use of medical marijuana, as currently is the case, is not allowed as a reasonable accommodation. Excess utility charges. The consumption-based utility allowances are no longer implemented by the CHA, and therefore this section has been removed from the ACOP. Pets and assistance animals, breed and weight restrictions do not apply in improving emotional support and service animals. Such restrictions will still apply for pets. The CHA will, however, consider disability-related needs in approving the number of animals that will be allowed. And that concludes the proposed updates for CHA's admissions and continued occupancy policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ketsia. So we're going to move on to the public comment portion of this meeting. The first thing I'd like to do is just ask you to briefly address one of the questions that came up in the in-person meeting, because we may get other questions about it, which is I think somebody asked about whether or not CHA has the flexibility to modify the medical marijuana policy. And could you guys expand on that? Because I think we had said that it was a question of HUD complying with HUD regulations.
Yes, so CHA's policy related to medical marijuana or cannabis is consistent with HUD regulations. Medical marijuana are not allowed on CHA properties.
Okay, thank you, Katsia. We also received 2 questions in the chat that I'm going to read one at a time. We will try to address these questions to the extent possible, but I want the person who submitted those, I want you to know that we will respond to you directly as well, because these questions, we may need to get some additional information from you. So the first question is about if you have a reasonable accommodation, but your unit is uninhabitable, so you have issues with the quality of your unit, what would someone do in that circumstance?
So on the HCV side, you would contact the call center, request a transfer, and we will work to get you out of that unit. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the call center.
Okay, and we'll be asking, as I said, the person who submitted the question will get some additional information so we can contact them. And then, Ketsia, do you have anything to add to that? Is the process similar for public housing?
Indeed, the process is similar for public housing. If a resident has a reasonable accommodation need and that unit is uninhabitable, they must or should contact their property manager, which will provide them with the next steps for how to address that matter. But they
Okay.
should definitely be in touch with the property manager.
Thanks, Katsia. And then the second question is about, and I think this might have been one of the public housing slides, but it's how can you meet the income requirements if you have a zero rent affidavit? So can you expand a little bit on how that might work?
I'm sorry, the question is how do you meet this?
Yeah, if you have a zero rent affidavit and we have minimum income requirements.
So if you have zero rent, if you're not at that level, you must definitely reach out to your property manager first, and they will coordinate with you to complete the exact paperwork so that your screening would be every 180 days as opposed to the 90-day time period
Okay.
once this is approved.
Okay. Jamie, do you have anything to add, or is that similar?
On the HCV side, if you have zero income, request a zero income affidavit. We also have a minimum rent hardship process. If you qualify for that, request to apply, and we will consider whether you meet the minimum rent hardship criteria. And going from there, we will reassess at the beginning 3 months, and then after that, every 6 months.
Okay, thank you. Um, I think we've addressed all the questions that have been submitted in the chat. So I'm going to adjourn the hearing, but I do briefly want to mention that the public comment period does continue through May 31st. So if anyone has questions or comments that they think of once this hearing is concluded, after reviewing some of the information on our website, you can still submit your comments and questions by email to commentontheplan@thcha.org, by mail, fax, in-person drop-off. All of that information is available on CHA's website. And that, again, those comments will be accepted through May 31st. All of the comments that we've received will be included in a comment grid that will be posted on our website along with the other materials. And you will get a direct response if you have a question specific to your unit or voucher that's not related to the plan or the ACOP. Okay, so I'm going to adjourn the hearing. Thank you for those people who watched. Thanks.